Welcome to Cultural Proficiency, a way of being baseline training. My name is Minh, and I'm one of the facilitators of this training we did in December of 2020. I'm a longtime youth worker who started my career here in Cambridge, where I had the honor to meet Talisha Mervin and Susan Richards, my co-facilitators. This is an intro course on becoming more culturally proficient. We believe it starts with reflecting on our personal identity and expanding it to different aspects of our cultural groups. We're here to learn and listen to other stories because it's one of the best strategies to becoming more culturally proficient, taking the time to engage meaningfully and thoughtfully with folks who come from different walks of life. We hope you'll keep this in mind as we go through the course. There are a number of reflection points and discussion questions for you to work through this recording. One last thing before we go. We know becoming culturally competent is a lifelong journey. This may only be one small piece in your learning. We also hope you remind yourself, I don't need to know everything about all cultures and identities to treat everyone with respect and to help them. As youth workers, I hope you teach your young people the same thing. Thank you for watching and for committing to your continued learning.
Here we are, Cultural Proficiency, way of being. I am Talisha Mervin, one of your hosts. I am going to pass it on to Minh, and Susan then will introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Minh. I use she and they pronouns, and I'm really excited to see you all here today.
Hi, my name is Susan Richards, and I am also very excited to be here with all of you.
We're going to start off with just some quotes, and I'm going to read them out loud and just kind of reflect on what it means to you, how it resonates with you, and things like that, okay? So when you get these jobs that you have been so brilliantly trained for, just remember that your real job is that if you are free, you need to free somebody else. If you have some power, then your job is to empower somebody else. And this is a quote by Toni Morrison. And this quote really resonates with me. I use it a lot in my other trainings. So just take a moment. And my second quote that I picked is a chant that I've actually learned going to protests lately. And I think it's really very, very powerful. And the protest leaders ask folks to repeat this a number of times. And so I'm hoping that we all can kind of come off mute and just repeat after me. I'm going to say one line and then you repeat it. And then we're going to repeat the whole thing twice. Okay? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to start off. It is our duty to fight for our freedom.
It is our duty to fight for our freedom.
It is our duty to win.
It is our duty to win.
It is our duty to win.
We must love and support one another.
We must love and support one another.
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
All right, we're going to do it one more time, and I want folks to say it with conviction, okay? So, it is our duty to fight for our freedom.
It is our duty to fight for our freedom.
It is our duty to win.
It is our duty to win.
We must love and support one another.
We must love and support one another.
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
Thank you. Thank you for doing that. So this is a quote from Assata Shakur, who is the Black liberation radical leader. Thank you.
These are the quotes that I chose. The first one is by Stokely Carmichael. He was a leader in the SNCC movement, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and he's actually the man who coined the phrase Black Power. Black power can be clearly defined for those who do not attach the fears of white America to their questions about it. The other quote is by Bernadette Devlin. Bernadette Devlin is an Irish socialist. She was a member of the parliament in Northern Ireland and is a radical woman from Ireland who actually went on a speaking tour with Stokely Carmichael in the 80s. And one of her quotes that I found was, "We were born into an unjust system. We are not prepared to grow old in it."
In a racist society, It is not enough to be non-racist. We must be anti-racist. Angela Davis. My second quote is by Mr. Baldwin. We can disagree and still love each other unless our disagreement is rooted in my oppression and denies my humanity and my rights to exist. We're now going to just take a moment to ground ourselves in this training and to just be present in the moment. There's a lot going on in the world and a lot going on around us and inside of us. And so right now, I'm just going to ask for folks to just do a small exercise with me. I'm going to ask you to just simply, we carry tension sometimes in our necks and in our shoulders, stresses that we don't even realize sometimes. So what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of rotate our shoulders back 3 times. We're going to rotate our necks 3 times. And I'm going to ask you to then take your hands and put them on your chest and take a deep breath in just 3 times. But I want you to leave your hand there. And then we're going to have a moment of silence where I will lead you through, and then we'll sit in a moment of silence. Okay. So let's start that again. Just rotate your shoulders back 3 times. And then your neck, when you can, just kind of rotate that. And no magic to it. It's just getting our body in the present moment, taking your hand on your chest and just taking in those deep breaths and just feeling your heart, accepting our just human abilities. So at this moment, as we take a moment of silence or reflect, we're thinking about the lives that have been taken. We're thinking about the lives that have been lost. We're also thinking about healing that this world so desperately needs. We're thinking about the strength that we draw on, whether it be ourselves or our ancestors, our loved ones, or just our energy. And then we're thinking about the resilience that lives in every single one of us as we just sit in a moment of silence. I have something that I usually say during these trainings. It's called the ouch rule. And that simply just means that occasionally somebody will say something that resonates with you or that can be a little painful. And I ask you to acknowledge that. It's a moment for you to acknowledge what has happened and what has had an impact in your mind or in your heart, so that you don't just glaze over it. Because those are moments when we stretch. Those are the moments when we grow. And those are the moments that we're looking for to cause the shifting in our world. So please don't ignore those moments. Acknowledge them. If you need to jot it down or write it down, do that. But whatever you do, we can't ignore anymore. Thank you.
So our goals are to develop a continuous learning approach that challenges us to take personal responsibility for developing our cultural humility. To acquire awareness of our responsibility to actively advocate for institutional accountability for cultural humility, to become empowered to challenge oppression, to begin to see the power of denying or affirming people's full humanity, and to develop strategies to give and get support in this journey. It's important to realize that our goals for the training are really our goals for our lives. So they feel really big, and they need to be, and they really are bigger than this training. And we just want to make sure that you guys realize that we realize that too. So the take backs, they're also pretty lofty, but I think they're things that we want you to take back more immediately. So a self-awareness of when privilege or dominance is present. And I think Talisha's ouch rule is a helpful one, so that if you can feel your dominant voice, that you be more mindful of that. That's something I'm working on, so that that's something that we hope is a more immediate takeaway for individuals, that we acknowledge our vulnerability, that we are going to be taking back a model for continuous learning that we're going to work with. It's the 10 C's of awareness and change, a tool that was developed several years ago, I think in the early 90s, by Ulrich Johnson and Patty DeRosa. It's still being used today, is a very helpful framework for this work. Understanding of the importance of listening to, asking clarifying questions, and sharing personal stories in deepening our cultural humility. And we'd be using that strategy today as our main strategy. Understanding the historical and persistent harm done when we deny the impacts of bias and privilege.
We're going to ask you to kind of do this activity yourself individually, just to kind of think about your identity. So the first C is color. So this can be your physical skin color, but it can also be other aspects of your identity that you can't really change. For example, for me, I am Asian American, and I am also part of the LGBTQ or queer community. And so for me, I can't take that off. I look really queer all the time. And so that's can be part of the color C. The next one is culture. So this can be everything that has to do with how you were brought up, where you come from, the values that you hold, the beliefs that you share with your family or your community. This can be, a religious community. It can be an affiliation. For example, Red Sox culture is definitely something, right? And so kind of think about all the different ways that culture can kind of show up in your identities, in your groups, who you affiliate with, all those sorts of things. I'll talk about this a little bit more in my story. The third one has to do with class. So this has to do with your access to wealth, your access to employment, your access to resources, right? So for myself, I grew up thinking that I was really, really pretty poor until you grow up and then you start to see other folks around you that have less than you, that have more than you. It has to do with how you can access going to college, right? If you go to college, that kind of puts you in a different place class-wise. Not always, but sometimes it does, right? The fourth one is character. So this one has more to do with your personal identity, kind of who you are, how you are. This, for me, an example would be your introversion or extroversion. So there are some people who are a little bit more quiet, more kind of reserved, keep to themselves, and that has everything to do with character. I find that in our world, people who are extroverted have a lot of power. They get to say more things. They get looked to as more of the leaders all the time, right? And that's not always the case. So that's just one thing that has to do with character. And then the last one is context. So kind of who you are in your surroundings. So I am here in Massachusetts. My identities look very different than if I was in Vietnam, my parents' home country, right? My identity would look and feel very different than here in the United States, here in Massachusetts, versus anywhere else. So I grew up in New Mexico, and I didn't really understand what it meant to be Asian American growing up in a majority minority state. So I was had lots of Latinx folks around me, and I didn't fully understand what that meant because I didn't have these types of conversations. I didn't have these trainings. And so it was very interesting. But at the same time, I've still noticed that in my classes, I was able to access education, right? I was in classes with primarily white children, where the other Hispanic and Latinx children were placed in other classrooms. And as a kid, I didn't fully understand that. And it wasn't until later that I started to recognize that this was an inequality that was happening. And I didn't know why. And it took me more time through my life to really understand the differences in what that means and the implications for why the classes look different, who you hang out with look different. So I didn't really fully understand who I was until I got to youth group in high school. My youth worker was the first one who told me that quiet leaders exist And I think that was one of the first times that I felt seen as a young person, right? I didn't believe in myself. I didn't know that I could be something until kind of that moment where an adult said, you belong and you exist and you should exist. You have value in this world, right? So that was fantastic. And I got to go to college. I had the privilege of getting to go to a very great school where I got to learn more about what it means to be Asian American. I found other folks who looked like me, who understood what it meant to grow up and have people tease you for your food, right? Throughout middle school and high school, I was pretty ashamed of what I was eating. And so I tried to hide it and things like that. Got to college and recognized that there are other people who have the same kind of experience, this racialized experience of being Asian American. And then I got to learn about the social movements around Asian American rights and trying to fight for equality in the Asian American community. I also found out that I was really, really gay, and I had never had that opportunity to talk about it. And it took me, 18 years to find out that this is who I am, and I got to start living my truth and to really understand that there's a lot of power and community in the queer community, but in the Asian American community too. I graduated and I actually kind of took some steps back because I moved to Boston and I started really questioning who I was and who I wanted to be, because at college it's like a bubble and everybody's really nice and cool, but in the real world it's very different. I was on the B line in Boston and really struggling with who I was and how I could be my full self for a really long time. And I kind of had to go back, and I was ashamed of who I was for a little bit. And it took me some time. I got to do an AmeriCorps program, and that's how I ended up in Cambridge at Tutoring Plus, which is a small nonprofit right down the street from Community Arts Center. It's housed in the Fletcher Maynard School, and that's where I really got to find a community. I got to meet amazing young people and amazing folks who are really dedicated to making sure that all of our young people get the same access and the conversations that need to be happening to help them feel seen, just like I was, right? And so I think that's why I love youth work. I really love getting to help people see themselves, making sure that they have hopes and dreams and things like that. And I'm also working with adults, young adults who are also doing this work, because that's not always the case. You kind of grow up and you're just kind of pushed into adulthood and you don't really know how to do it. And so I'm hoping to make that an easier transition. So I, at Tutoring Plus is where I started to really see the inequalities of the world, really getting to understand that my experience is very different from the young people that I was working with, and really trying to figure out why the systems were working against them all the time, right? The systems of school. It's really very not great for many of our young people, as many of you probably know already, that they don't feel super safe. They don't really love learning because they are getting messages that they don't belong, that school is not for them, or that they're wrong and things like that. And so that's a really pretty oppressive system that young people have to go through just to get to adulthood. And so I was trying to figure out ways to help young people see that, and how you can build resilience and understanding so that you can move through it and still do well. I'm going to share a really quick. I'll talk about this very briefly. This is the iceberg, the culture iceberg. And so when I'm talking about, like at school, when you have like an international day, right? Usually you dress up in certain things, you have the food and you have the music. That's the stuff at the top, right? So all of this kind of surface level stuff. But when you look at it, like my transition from New Mexico to Boston was very shocking, because in almost every way possible, it's completely different. In New Mexico, the motto is mañana, meaning I'm going to do it tomorrow. It's cool. I don't need to focus too much on it. And here in Boston, that's not the case, right? Everybody's always go, go, go. You have to be running marathons. You have to get these jobs and these degrees and things like that. And so that was a big transition for me. And then another transition or interesting intersection of culture was also with my young people, right? So we have certain expectations of how young people are supposed to be. We expect them to have their eyes on us at all times. They have to be listening quietly. They have to be sitting like little robots. And that's not the culture that many of our young people are growing up in, right? And so I had to adapt to that. I had to help my volunteers adapt to that and understand that that expectation is actually probably not the best way to actually relate with young people. And so we can take a look at this. You can search it up. There are lots of other things in here. Eye contact is another one that's really big. Other things that I had to come to terms with was concepts of respect and also trust. I think that culturally we have different definitions of it. And so when we're thinking about working with young people or anybody, right, that there are lots of ways that we have to really unpack what do we mean by respect? What do we mean by trust? Is there a different way to kind of frame it and make sure that we all understand what we actually mean and not just expecting one thing? So this chart is called the privilege and oppression wheel. It's really overwhelming, and I'm sorry for that. But if you look it up, I think it's really interesting because this is where the intersections of identity for me come up, right? That I've already shared with you that I am Asian American, I am Vietnamese, I am queer in that I actually am not a woman. I grew up and finally got to this point where I started understanding that I am more of a non-binary person. I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. When I go out to schools, the little ones always ask me, are you a boy or a girl? And I always say, what do you think I am? And then I try and have a conversation with them about, you know, I'm a little bit of both. I'm a little bit of a boy. I'm a little bit of a girl. Is that all right with you? And the little ones usually are like, okay, yeah, that's good. That's cool. Every once in a while, I'll get some pushback and they'll be like, but you're wearing a boy's shirt. And I'll go, well, it's my shirt. I like this shirt. Is that all right? And most of the time, again, they're like, that's cool. That's fine. It's usually with adults that I'm always a little unsure of how I present myself, right? So I have to try and present myself a little bit more professional, a little bit more adult, because otherwise I would look like a weird 16-year-old when I'm actually much, much older than that. And so I think about the intersections of my identity quite a bit. So on the chart, right, all the stuff at the top is all the things that have power, right? So if you're thinking about somebody like Jeff Bezos, he is a white man who is able-bodied. He has all the education, all the class. He has the dominant language. He is light-skinned. All of these things intersect to help him keep his power. Right? And so if you think of all of these things that all our Congress, people in power, even our superintendents have a lot of these intersecting identities and they hold a lot of power because of their identities. And then all the folks on the bottom here are facing a lot of oppression and a lot of resistance throughout their life. But I want to say that every one of us has some amount of both, right? That we have some privileges and we also have some resistance in our lives. For myself, right, I've already said that I have a lot of education. I am in this age range where people take me seriously. I'm not too young or not too old. I can speak English fluently. Nobody knows that I can't, that wasn't my first language or my first several languages, actually. But at the same time, I also have some resistance that I'm part of the queer community, that I am not seen as having a lot of class, you know, not always. And that I am, it's just does that kind of make sense? That we all have intersecting identities and some of them have privilege and some of them don't always have privilege. That's not always the case. When we're thinking about our young people, they don't always see that sometimes, that they have some different combinations of being able to access, you know, resources. In Cambridge, I feel like living in Cambridge and growing up in Cambridge sometimes can be a privilege as opposed to somewhere else. Not always, but I think for some of us, it looks very different. Does this make sense, the privilege and oppression wheel? You can take a closer look at it, but I found it really very helpful in understanding kind of my journey through doing this work. I'm really trying to make sure that our young people get to talk about these things, get to understand what it means to be queer and to be facing maybe being an immigrant or face having different disabilities, right? And so the intersections of that are very, very important to me in my journey through. My last slide has to do with becoming more anti-racist. And this has been a big journey for me over the course of the last several years, where, we start off, many people are in this fear zone, right? So this fear zone is those people out there who are saying, I don't see race, this isn't a problem. They are the ones who are probably saying all lives matter, right? And that's because they want to be comfortable. They don't want the world to change. And they're really stuck on making sure that their life isn't affected by all of the stuff that's going on around them. They're the ones who are like, oh, this doesn't matter to me, right? But what I'm finding is that many of you, all of you actually, are probably in this learning zone where you have already gotten to see that we need to start talking about these things. We're starting to maybe understand more about race. We're starting to understand more about the intersections of all those identities that I just talked about, right? And that we're open to learning and that we want to listen and learn from each other. And then folks are moving more into that growth zone where we're starting to speak out and we're starting to be more active and trying to do different things. Some of us can go to protests. Some of us can donate money. Some of us can stay at home and learn more and listen to leaders and folks who are really leading the movements right now. Like they are coming out with amazing resources. There are all sorts of resources and talks, and you can watch people on Instagram Live, and they are saying really, really fantastic things. But we're also hoping that those of us in the growth zone are able to kind of start challenging things that we start seeing in our families. My partner is really challenging and working and having those very, very hard conversations with their family right now. And for me, I'm kind of on the different side where I'm actually starting to challenge some of those things at my organization. So we released a statement that was trying to be supportive of the movement, but didn't explicitly say Black Lives Matter. And I called them out on it. And I said, if you're not saying that, can you imagine what a young person or a volunteer sees or doesn't hear in that statement? So that's a big, long battle there. But, it's taking that courageous action to start speaking out when you see something and saying, this isn't right. We have to do something. We have to change the system that we've built, and we have to do a little bit. It's going to take a long time, right? I think that's one of my big takeaways is that this is all happening and lots of folks are jumping into it, but it's not just going to happen overnight. This is going to be a long, long battle before we get to a place where everybody feels seen and heard and valued. So I just wanted to leave with just a couple action steps that I have been doing and that you can also try. So one is doing the work. Go out and learn, listen, read. Social media is really fantastic. I'm starting to follow more and more Black leaders and other leaders in different identities too, right? So I'm diversifying my Instagram feed. I'm starting to follow folks who are in the disability rights movement. I'm trying to follow Asian American folks who are trying to work across the aisle. And, I'm very inspired by our civil rights leaders who, like Martin Luther King, he wasn't just advocating for Black folks to be free. He was trying to advocate and make sure that the war in Vietnam wasn't happening. He was advocating for my people at the same time. And I'm really very inspired by that. There are lots of other Asian American civil rights leaders who really had to work with and advocated for the Black community, like Yuri Kochiyama and Grace Lee Boggs, who were fighting alongside the leaders in the civil rights movement. And I think it needs to be the same. I think this is why I'm really so excited to see all of you here today, is that we all have to join together to fight. It's not just a Black issue. It's not just a white issue. Asian folks have to jump in. We have to not center ourselves. And we have to just listen and take the lead from folks who are already doing this work, right? It's not up to me to jump in and be like, oh, I'm going to do all this work. It's going to be great. There are people who are already doing this fantastic work. There are organizations you can join to support this work too. I'm also learning quite a lot from Twitter. I think Twitter is really, really fantastic. I'm learning so much. I highly suggest you go on there. There's lots of resources, and I'm learning a lot about history that we didn't get to learn, that we still won't get to learn in our curriculum about Black history, about the different movements. And I hope that our young people can also start to access those. And then the last one is just to examine our own privileges, right? So like I said, I hold some privileges and I also hold some oppressions. And I have to figure out, when am I benefiting from those privileges? How can I use my privilege to actually stand up for others? And so just because I'm doing this work doesn't mean I'm perfect. I'm still making mistakes, and I need to make sure that I am accountable for when I am not doing things right. And it's okay to make mistakes, because this is a lifelong journey.